So I wonder how many of these talks I'll be invited to give in the future. I'm actually not going to present any data today. I'm not going to present any slides. I'm going to do something wholly unforgivable at a science conference, and that's I'm going to talk about my feelings and my faith. But before I do that, I've asked Dr. Graves, who I don't want to take any time out of his own presentation, to tell you guys a story that he's recently told me that I think is appropriate as a part of my presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joseph Graves from NCA&T.
So, Mike Travisano told you earlier about important events in evolutionary biology in 1988. He left one out that I think is extremely important in this field. 1988 was also the first year that an African American earned a PhD in evolutionary biology. Now, that person happened to be me. And I was a graduate student finishing at Wayne State when Michael Rose came out to visit Leo Luckenbill, both of them were working on the evolution of postponed senescence. And I was in the lab finishing my thesis. Michael walked in, he looked at what I was doing, he thought it was really exciting. Then he flew back to Irvine and he went to Rich Lenski and he said, well, I met this grad student at Wayne State and I think we ought to bring him here somehow. And then Rich asked, what's this person you met? And Michael said his name is Joe Graves. And Rich said, well, I know him. We were undergraduates together at Oberlin. And then it was Rich's idea to propose my candidacy for the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship at UC Irvine, which brought me there as a postdoctoral researcher with Michael Rose. And the rest, they say, is history. But there's also some really interesting history that you folks don't know. Now, you would think in 1990, at the time I hit the job market, that most of the Jim Crow, racialist, segregationist ideas about what someone should be as a professor in higher education in this country would have disappeared. But the simple fact of the matter is that that was not the case. And in many different venues in which I applied for a professorship with outstanding credentials, I was turned down again and again for reasons that my allies and hosts considered to be racial. One of these events actually occurred at UC Irvine. And this is where I had applied for a position as an assistant professor. One of the members of the faculty felt that, for whatever reason, they didn't want me there. Whether they favored some other candidate or not, I don't know. But this person colluded to actually hide my application so that it didn't go into the applicant pool. And so when this was discovered, Michael and Richard and 7 other professors went to the provost, outlined what had happened, and I would never have gotten my first appointment if Richard hadn't been willing to take that courageous act of standing up to a process that was biased. Now, again, you could say contingency, because later on, when I was an assistant professor at UC Irvine, I saw the application of a promising, of someone I thought was a promising graduate student. The members of the graduate committee weren't so sure that this person was promising. But when I looked at this person's file, I said, this Paul Turner guy, he actually looks quite promising. And so I was able to convince the graduate committee to admit Paul Turner. Paul then comes to Irvine, works with Rich, and as I say, the rest was all history. But these are things that would not have happened if Richard Lenski had not acted. So if there's a lesson to be learned here, and I hope that some of you will take this lesson away, and this has been said many times, that all that is required for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Richard Lenski was a good person who did something. Thank you, Richard.
So with that being said, I don't have much to say to you today that you're not already aware of, but I thought we should take a few minutes today to talk about it anyway. And that is Rich Lenski as a man, and in my case particularly as an advisor, and how the way Rich is with us, the way the Lenski Lab is as a family, facilitates the running of a very large and diverse lab. And because our lab is so diverse and so successful, that is really making a contribution to diversity in professional science. I actually wanted to start my talk off today by saying you can probably disregard everything I say because the man I'm talking about currently pays my bills. But to some extent, that's my point, is that this is my job. And I have a tremendous honor of being in the Lenski Lab. Those of you who heard Mike Weiser speak earlier this morning, Mike actually trained me when I got to the Lenski Lab, and how I got there was quite interesting. I actually had my background in anthropology, and I was studying sexual selection in humans because I went to school to be a dating coach. And Penn State sent me out to the Evolution Conference in Snowbird, Utah to present my master's research in the hopes that I might find additional graduate programs that were interested in recruiting me. At the time, I only cared about getting a job because that's what I really needed. And on the second day of that conference, Beacon came to me and told me they were going to help me find a job. When I got out to Michigan, I was hired as a teaching assistant, which I was great with. I taught an evolutionary biology class, and that was lots of fun. But my actual title was Research Technician Level 1, and I couldn't do any research technician. I had no laboratory skills. But I had met Rich out in Utah, and he was just so nice to me. I mean, this was the great Rich Lenski, and he came to sit down and talk to me. And this was the night after he gave his keynote address, and I had to admit, oh, you're the guy who gave that big talk last night that me and my friends skipped because we wanted to go party and none of us were in bacteria. Rich probably should have just got up and walked away. But he did. He stayed and talked to me, and it turns out that we both just shared a passion for evolution and a passion for thinking and a passion for Darwin. And so when I found myself at Beacon totally untooled for the task at hand, I decided to ask Rich if I could get training in his lab, thinking he would say no, but he would at least be kind enough about it that I wouldn't be devastated. And then I could go back to Danielle and Eric and say, hey, I tried to be a real research tech when I was here, it's just not going to work out, I'm sorry. But of course Rich said yes, and then he asked Mike Weiser to train me. And you guys have seen a little bit today of just how unbelievably brilliant and talented a researcher in his own right that Mike Weiser is. Mike Weiser had to teach me how to use my pen. Okay? And he never took that task to be beneath him, even though I could see that I clearly thought it was. And so now I actually, Mike has graduated and is doing a postdoc and still with us, but isn't in the lab quite as much. And I actually work at the same bench I was trained at now, that's my bench. And it means a great deal to me. So I want you guys to just know a little bit about what that feels like. It feels unbelievable. Can I ask Nkrumah and Kyle to stand for a second? So if you look back there, there's Nkrumah and Kyle. They mean the world to me. My dad growing up, thanks guys, my dad growing up was an administrator at Seton Hall University. He had 3 students from inner city New Jersey who were in my father's pre-med program. And they all made a pact together to see each other through their undergraduate experience at Seton Hall and through medical school and dental school. They're now known as the 3 doctors. There's been documentaries made about them. They've started their own foundation. But since my father mentored them, I knew them growing up as a child. And Kyle and Nkrumah and I have a very similar path because we came to the same cohort. We are the official Lenski babies. We are Dr. Lenski's most recent grad students. And I truly believe that he recruited us with each other in mind. Dr. Lenski also recently wrote a grant this year. It was called Integrating Research and Education and Diversity. And in it, he talks about how the work that Kyle and Nkrumah and I do is integral to the mission of the long-term evolution experiment. And he wrote this grant on his own. He didn't tell us about it ahead of time. He didn't ask us to do anything for it. And on top of that, he was helping us finish our own grant. So, you heard a little bit earlier about the red tide that leaves behind nothing but excellence. Dr. Lenski's grant was funded and my grant was funded. So that red tide of excellence got me paid. Okay? And I greatly appreciate that. I'll tell you another feeling I have is I said to Kyle one day, I can see this picture of Darwin that sort of is hanging on our wall and it sort of overlooks my bench when I'm working. And I turned to Kyle one day and I said, do you realize that if Darwin was still alive right now, he would be one of these people who was going crazy over the LTV. He would be blogging constantly about the results that come out of our lab. He would want to meet us. He would be talking to us. We'd be like, oh, Darwin's coming. I don't have time to go to lunch with Darwin. It's going to take like 2 hours. I gotta get my transfer done. Like, he comes back another time, please. But that was just an incredible feeling. I do work, really that's a continuation of the work that Mike Travisano started in my lab on quantifying the relative effects of adaptation, chance, and history. I've added little wrinkles of being able to go 50,000 generations in instead of 2,000, using multiple sugars to create adaptive radiations, which was something that always fascinated me. And I had this feeling over my Beacon grant that said, oh my goodness, Jonathan Moses would love this. Peter and Rosemary Grant would eat this up. Stephen J. Gold, who talks about replaying the tape of life, would be blown away with how literally we've taken that in our experiments. And to be a part of that legacy and that tradition is unbelievable. Last year at Beacon Congress, I remember Paul frickin' Turner came up to me and he sat down across from me at a table and we were just eating together. And I said to myself, Jason, here's a young African-American male who went through your lab and is now a professor at Yale. That doesn't mean that I'll be a professor at Yale one day, but the fact that the possibility is there is so amazing. We talk about faith as the belief in the things that are not seen. I have not seen my name in a major publication. I have not received any prestigious postdoctoral job offers as a PhD, but I have faith that I will, because I have complete faith and confidence in my advisor, and that's unbelievable. I can't say enough about this man and what he's done for us. But he is in our corner. He supports us. He takes time and energy out of his day. He's never. People always tell me, "How do you get in touch with Lenski? He's always so busy. Like, how does he even communicate?" I say, "I don't have that issue with Lenski." Now, granted, I'm the squeaky oil that gets the wheel. The squeaky wheel that gets the oil. But I really just thank you so much. We have a saying, I used to be a very religious man, and he used to say about Jesus that he looked beyond my faults and saw my need. And I can definitely say that Dr. Bundy does that. I'm not the only African-American male in my lab. That means the world to me. I'm the only student with a disability in my lab. That means the world to me. When I showed up and I met Jeff Morris, another guy who had long hair and wore leather jackets and played loud rock and roll music, I was not the only one in my lab. And it means the world to us. Thank you all so much for your time. And thank you, Dr. Lenski.